Hi everyone, Ashley here and welcome to another video on the Penguin Palace Stamps YouTube channel. Today I have a fun water-themed card to share with you featuring the new stamp set from Penguin Palace Stamps as part of their Spring 2020 release, and the stamp set is called The More We Get Together. So without further ado, let's get into it. I'm starting by ink blending my background, so I cut out a piece of nice white paper that's good for ink blending. I like to use Strathmore brand, and I'm just taping it down to my work surface so it doesn't move around too much. I had then cut out a stencil out of vellum. I just made this myself. I used a wavy border die and I cut along the top edge as well as along the bottom edge of that piece of vellum. And the key things to remember if you're doing this are to just make sure that that vellum piece that you're using is a little bit longer than your card panel, so it covers the whole length of the panel, or width I should say. And that when you cut the top and the bottom, you do sort of the same direction of the die along the top and the bottom, and that will allow you to get sort of the positive and negative version of that pattern. So I'm using, I guess, what I would call the positive version here to ink blend a couple different colors of Distress Oxide ink. I used Antique Linen and then Vintage Photo above, or on top, and that's just to create that sandy layer. I'm speeding up the blending here so you can see it all come together. But then after that, I just moved that stencil down and covered up the sand so that I could blend over with blue. So on the bottom there I used Faded Jeans, and then I used Blueprint Sketches in the middle and Tumbled Glass on the top. I then sprayed the whole panel with some water just to kind of create a nice splattered watery look. And you can see I'm using that stencil here as a mask this time, and I'm allowing it to cover over the sand part so that the water only splatters on the watery part where it's blue. So that's another kind of cool way to use those handmade stencils. I then wanted to add a layer of shimmer, so I just dabbed out a few little blobs of liquid stardust, which is just a clear shimmer liquid, and I'm just splattering it out onto the whole panel using a paintbrush. I'm doing the same thing again but with white paint, so I just dabbed out a little bit of white paint and I'm just diluting it down with some water, so that I can then splatter it out onto the card panel as well, and I'm just doing it the same way I did the sparkle. So I'm just mixing up the paint with the water there to get it nice and diluted so that it's a good consistency for splattering. There's not really a formula here, I just do like a couple drops of paint, a few drops of water, and then I can splatter it out. And you can see that you get that cool like random white splattery pattern, which I think is really nice, especially for water. It kind of makes it look extra dynamic and textured. So I just made sure to keep going until I was really happy with how much of those little white splatters are on the background. Now I'm planning to turn this into a slider card. And the thing about slider cards is that you cut the slider channel into the card and then you kind of get a peekaboo into what's behind that slider channel, so it's see-through. And I knew that I wanted it to continue to look like water, so I didn't want there to be anything else behind that slider channel other than what looks like just more water. So I'm just blending up a separate little piece of cardstock here with the same blue color. So I'm using, that was Blueprint Sketch that I did first, and now I'm doing Faded Jeans and just blending them together. And I'm also going to apply, as you'll see, the same sort of effects with water, sparkle, and white splatter. And this is just to make sure that I have a piece of cardstock that is identical to that card front, and I can place it behind the slider channel and have the slider channel just completely blend in so you won't even notice it's there. So I'm just going ahead and splattering out that little piece for the background with some water, just again so that it matches that front. And once I splatter it with water, I can just dab it off with some paper towel to make sure that it kind of dries off a little bit, and that will pull up some of the ink, so it'll leave those little clear spots, which I think are really pretty for water. I'm then splattering out the sparkle again, and I'm going to do the white paint again. This time I dabbed a couple dabs of water first onto my acrylic block and then the white paint, and then that made it easier to kind of blend the white paint in, because I found that if I dabbed the white paint first and then the water, that the water kind of sprayed the paint everywhere. So if you want to avoid that, just do a couple dabs of water first and then just dab the paint right into that. Then mix it up until it's a good consistency and splatter it out. Okay, so now it's time to stamp out all the images that I want to use on my card. So I'm just assembling them onto a piece of white paper here in my mini MISTI, and then I can use that left panel of the MISTI to pull up all the stamps and ink them up. Like I mentioned, all the images that I'm using on today's card are from the More We Get Together stamp set from Penguin Palace Stamps. And this set comes with a lot of really cute underwater themed images, some different sort of plant type things, some different critters. I think there's a starfish, a little jellyfish, some cuttlefish, and then what I find the cutest stamp is a cat within a little submarine type fish object, which is really cute. So I'm just stamping them out with black ink, and I stamp them twice just to make sure I get a nice clean, crisp black image, and just pressing down with my fingers to really get that ink onto the paper. And once that's done, I can go ahead and start coloring. Now I apologize in advance for a couple of reasons. First, that I now have this gross band-aid on my finger. I cut my finger off camera, not crafting, but just doing other things, so sorry about that. Also, I missed filming a few of these images, so some of them you can see are already colored, but I am going to film and show all the rest of the coloring. So I'm going to speed up the video here. Feel free to watch the rest of the coloring come together for the rest of these images, and I will see you in a bit. Okay, so now that the coloring is done, it's time to bring the rest of the card together. I have a white paneled card base, and I'm just gluing on a piece of purple stripy patterned paper onto the front there using liquid glue, and just making sure that it's nicely aligned. At first I didn't quite get it aligned, so I'm just pulling it back and redoing it. That's the good thing about liquid glue. It's kind of temporary at first until it sets, and then it becomes really permanent, so you can always swish it around and kind of undo it if you really need to at first. I'm then going to adhere down my card panel here, and as you can see, I went ahead and die cut a slider channel using a slider channel die, and that's kind of a wavy shaped die. And that will allow space for one of my images to kind of slide back and forth along the waves. But like I mentioned, I wanted to have the background of that slider channel just blend right in and look like water. So I'm just taking that piece that I had blended separately and kind of done all the same things to it as I had done to the card front, and just gluing it right down onto the card panel at the back there. This way it will just be behind that slider channel. For the card front itself, I've placed a dime where it will be in that slider channel, and I'm using it to measure where I should put my foam. So I just cut down a bunch of pieces of foam and adhered them to that panel with double-sided tape, and now I can go ahead and adhere that whole panel down onto the card base. I just put my dime there where I know it should be so that it doesn't get lost, and I can make sure that the panel is nice and straight, and then tack it down and really press down to make sure that it's nice and stuck down. Then I can take a slider channel element. This is one by My Favorite Things, and it's just this little piece of white plastic basically, but it kind of gives your image something to stick down to and elevate it off from the dime. I adhered that down onto the dime with some double-sided tape, and then put some double-sided tape on the top so that I can stick down that image onto it. And as you can see now, the cat slides back and forth in that slider channel really nicely. So I went ahead and arranged all the rest of the images where I wanted them, and I'm sticking them down onto the front of the card using a mixture of liquid glue and foam squares. So for some of the images I'm sticking them right down with glue, and for some of them I'm sticking them down using foam squares to give them a little bit of elevation. And I like doing this just for a little bit of variety. I stuck the little red fish into the hole of that little fish house down at the bottom, which I thought was really cute. And for a final touch, I'm just adding a couple little sequins around the card using some liquid glue as well. So that is the card for today. Here you can see that cat sliding back and forth in the slider channel as I tilt the card back and forth, which is really fun. And as I tilt it, you can also see all the sparkle that you get from those sequins, as well as from all the splatter in the background, which I think is really nice. So thank you so much for watching this video today. If you want to see more of my cards, head over to my Instagram account, which is linked down in the description box below. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you here next week. Bye!